In this chapter, we're going to focus on using a variety of approaches to configure a Spring Data JPA project. Now, while we'll be focusing on JPA, the concepts and lessons that we learn in this chapter will be applicable to other projects within the Spring Data umbrella. So, for example, the approach we take to configure our Spring Data JPA project will teach us some core concepts that we can then apply when configuring a Spring Data Mongo project. When working to configure a Spring project, we have a number of approaches available to us. Spring allows us to configure our projects using XML, annotations, and Java configuration. About 2 years ago, another approach was introduced, and that is the Spring Boot approach. So, Spring Boot is a separate project that attempts to really simplify how you stand up a Spring project by applying several conventions. So, it's very opinionated in how the project should be configured and the type of underlying technologies used. So we will first see how to configure a Spring Data JPA project using Spring Boot. And when we perform this configuration, you're going to see that a lot of the configuration work has really been handled for you and is transparent to you. Now, this is great because it reduces the time it takes to establish a new project. However, we are relying upon Spring to make the right decisions for us. We don't have the granular control over the configuration that we may see in other approaches. My preference for configuring any Spring project is to use the XML configuration. I find that there is very good support for XML configuration within STS because it is one of the oldest approaches to configuring a Spring project. So there are a lot of resources out there when we look to configure a project using XML that we can rely upon, and it's also very well integrated into the tooling that we use. XML configuration also lends itself to being very easily integrated with annotation configuration, which I also like to use when I configure any Spring project. Throughout the remainder of this course, we will be using XML configuration, but within this chapter, we're going to take a look at the Spring Boot approach, as well as the Java configuration approach and the XML configuration approach. So we'll see each configuration approach in action. In order to work through a Java configuration approach and an XML configuration approach, we need to use Maven. And Maven is a build management tool that has an excellent dependency resolution feature. If you're not familiar with Maven, O'Reilly has another course, which I have created, that will help you get up to speed on that technology. Within our course, we're going to build out a base Maven project that we can then reuse throughout the course anytime we're configuring a project for a new data store. Once we have our base Maven project in place, we'll move on and start to actually perform the configurations for a Spring Data JPA project. And within that project, we're going to be discussing many of the JPA components that we'll be using. As you know, JPA relies upon an entity manager to persist instances of an entity. And it also relies upon some transaction management features that are all provided within Spring. We'll discuss these components throughout the chapter, but if you'd like to learn more about JPA, O'Reilly has another course on JPA which I have created. So there's some background resources you can use to get up to speed on these other technologies. One of the nice things that you'll see is that Spring provides a lot of out of the box support for JPA. You'll see that Spring has created different classes that perform the integration between your JPA provider, which in this case will be Hibernate, and the underlying Spring framework. So there's great integration between Hibernate and Spring Data. And one of the ways they do that is providing a bill of materials. It's called a BOM. And it's actually a way that the Spring Data project helps manage the dependency versions within a project. So we'll see how to add a bill of materials to our Maven project that is going to resolve a lot of the dependency resolution nightmares that can occur when you configure a new project.